What's going on, everyone? My name's Evan. This is my good friend David, and welcome to the debut episode of the Gen B podcast.
What's
You're
up, everyone?
probably you're probably wondering what the hell the B in Gen B stands for. Well, the B stands for Bitcoin, and so just to get right into it, Bitcoin is something that David and I are definitely very passionate about. Because of David, I've been uh, introduced to it probably a year and a half ago. David's been in it a little bit longer than I have, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the purpose of this podcast is really to educate and inform people about Bitcoin. And we're continuing to learn, truthfully, day in and day out about it. There's new stuff to learn every day, and we're hoping to share that with everybody because we feel that, um, you know, Bitcoin is a really unique opportunity for, you know, really for our generation, anyone that's in their, early 20s, mid 30s. Um, Bitcoin's for everybody, but really that's who we're focused on just because we can relate most to that generation. But,
Okay.
uh, you know, Bitcoin, Bitcoin can kind of seeps into a lot of different aspects of life, which we'll get into in future episodes, as well as I'm sure we'll touch on this first one. But this first episode is really going to be just to um, kind of let everybody know who we are, what our backgrounds are, and how we met and how we got started into Bitcoin. Um, so, to kick things off, David, you wanna introduce yourself?
Yeah, no, crushed it on the background. I don't think I have anything else to add to that. So my last point would be we need to add like a dun dun dun, like some like post editing sound bits for the B and Bit. It stands for
Well,
Bitcoin.
well, first we need to figure out. Let's get the audio down, and that is a good quick thing to say. Bear with us if there's any audio. If the audio sounds shitty, we've never recorded a podcast before, so bear with us. This first episode, we're going through the learning process, so don't quit on us yet. Just
Yeah, we're all about transparency here. This is what our eighth recording at this point, a little less, but it might as well be 15 is how it's spelled. So we're really trying to make sure the audio is crisp for you guys, that we're putting out high quality content. So open to feedback if it's not meeting those needs. But yeah, no, great kickoff with just like what the podcast is about. Again, I don't have anything to add to that. So like you said, we'll hop into just kind of our backgrounds. I think one of the most important things is we're just two pretty normal 29, 30-year-olds. So we don't have a background in like finance or anything like that. We don't have long careers in business. We just stumbled into Bitcoin in our own ways, and are looking to really help streamline that learning. Like a lot of the learnings I did were via random Twitter threads, podcasts by various people. And I think we both feel that a lot of the content that's out there is very, I don't know if heady is the right word, but just like too out there, too like you need a finance background to really make sense of everything. I think we struggle with some of that sometimes, trying to piece together what exactly are these people in this podcast saying. So hopefully we can be a filter of sorts to try to consume that information as best we can. And I mean, really regurgitate it in a way that is consumable for normal millennials and Gen Zs who are just getting their start in investing, saving, the workforce, whatever it may be. So that's really the goal here. And yeah, we want to introduce ourselves, say a little bit about our background, how we've gotten to today recording this podcast. So I can kick us off with that. I'm David, like Evan said. I'm from California originally, went to school at UC Santa Barbara, got a degree in econ. So that's really the extent of where my like finance background, if you'll call it that, comes from. So yeah, got a degree in econ and went on to work in sports marketing. So my first full-time job out of school was at Washington State University. That's actually where Evan and I met. Like he'll talk about, he was working in sports as well. So we both spent a year in Pullman, Washington, small little town in the state of Washington on the eastern side, basically Idaho at that point. So was definitely culture shock for myself. I think Evan as well, just being in such a small town. It's like 30,000 people living there when they're students, and I think 10 when there aren't. So um, we're lucky to find friends in each other. We worked in like a similar department, so our work overlapped a bit, and that's how we started to get to know each other. Um, we talked about it. I don't think we really got into business or anything too much during our year in Pullman, but then ended up going our separate ways. About a year later, I moved to Seattle at the time, started working for the University of Washington for the same company. And then Evan ended up going to Florida, where he's from originally. So COVID hit shortly thereafter. During COVID is where I think we really started to reflect on society, and obviously stimulus checks were coming out. Stock market had crashed in March that year, and we were really just trying to make sense of it all. We knew everything was chaotic. Our conversations turned to like business ideas for whatever reason. So I think we both have had a pretty entrepreneurial lean and want to do something outside the scope of just a 9 to 5. So maybe this podcast can scratch that itch for us a little bit. But yeah, just COVID was a really interesting time trying to make sense of money and the economy and society and everything. So maybe a quick transgression is like how I first started to get into investing and saving. My first full-time job again in Pullman was the first time that I really like started saving money seriously. I was not a very serious saver as a teenager, as most teenagers aren't. I think my parents were even worried about me that they might have to bail me out at some point in my adult life because whatever came in just immediately went out on like Slurpees and candy and all this dumb stuff. So my first like foray into investing was via an app called Acorns, not sponsored. Maybe we'll take them on one day, but they got to be about Bitcoin too. So what Acorns is it connects to your bank account. You spend, I don't know, $1.50 on a water bottle, and it rounds up to $2 and takes that 50 cents and invests it into like a mutual fund or whatever you select you want to be investing in. So just randomly did that. I think I saw an Instagram ad or something talking about that. Talked to my dad about it, and he was like, okay, maybe don't use this like random app. Maybe get set up at like a brokerage account with like a Charles Schwab or a Fidelity. So he helped walk me through that a little bit. Evan and I have talked about it, just like the importance of financial education, really in like your family and friends setting, I think is super important. And I know not everybody has that. So definitely have always been interested in like, how can we help spread more financial education to people who didn't receive that? And maybe this again can be a way to do that. But even my parents, like they learned from their parents, like there really is like a generational aspect to this that if you don't have that history, it's kind of hard to get involved in this stuff and just like investing and understanding money and all of that. So did traditional, just like put money into my Roth IRA at the time every month. Really just like got interested in money. And I think a big part of that is I don't want to work a 9 to 5 forever. I want financial freedom and the freedom to work on things that I want to and not be subject to a manager or an office or whatever else it may be. So just kept going down the rabbit hole. And then as we got into COVID, just having that extra time to like watch videos and whatnot, stumbled on a YouTube series talking about the history of money and like, what is money? How does it work? And there was one episode in particular that talked about how money was created. And like, again, I can't recite that off the top. Like it's a very complicated process, and we'll probably do an episode on it at some point, but it'll take prep to get that all organized. But basically walked away from that thinking like, this is a complete scam. Like I feel like they're almost stealing my time and energy by printing money away. They meaning like the government, put simply. And it's just like really disheartening. So again, talked to my dad about that. The guy who put on the video series was like, gold is the only way to save yourself from this money printing. which I think historically has been the case. So I was like, do I literally figure out how to buy gold coins and like get a safe? And I don't even know what that looks like. So didn't end up buying gold. Even one of his episodes in the series was about Bitcoin, and I watched that episode and I still didn't connect the dots at the time of like, oh, maybe I should look into this thing. I think Bitcoin was like maybe 8K then, if not even lower at the time. So didn't buy then. Um, a couple years went by, got interested into like NFTs via a friend who was like interested in that and buying some crypto and whatnot. And bought some NFTs, ended up losing money in the long run. What really interested me with NFTs was this concept of digital ownership, the idea that for the first time ever, you could take a digital asset and like claim ownership of it. So, in theory, at least, like we can talk about why that isn't actually the case, but just going and getting involved in like NFTs, crypto, like I dabbled really in a lot of different things, including Bitcoin, nothing like too in depth. And eventually just started going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. I probably came across some tweets, or I remember there was an interview with Michael Saylor, who you'll probably hear a lot about if you're a part of this community, talking about the value of Bitcoin. And Evan talks about it. We had talked about NFTs a good amount. We like bought some NFTs together in a certain project, and he texted me once like, "Hey, I have this NFT question," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm not really focusing on that. Like, I'm really into this Bitcoin thing." And took you a little while to turn the corner, I think. And everybody does this at their own pace, like we're saying, so it's not a bad thing at all. You were really busy at the time too, so a lot of this is like, do you have the time to dive into this stuff? But yeah, I think that's probably a good stopping point. Like that's really where I think Evan started to hear about it, minus maybe early days. So I'll let you tell your side of the story as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate yeah, that was a good sum up of your end of things. Um, you already touched on a lot of it, but I guess my background, um, born and raised in New York, moved to South Florida when I was, going into middle school. Went to Florida State University for my undergrad, and I studied sport management there. So didn't know shit about. I don't even think I took macro or microeconomics. I don't think it was even required for that major. So, um, I really never was too financially savvy. At that point in time, like graduate, like, I had jobs here and there in high school and in college. But like you said, David, I knew that I was taught to save my money, but like didn't really do a good job of it. Just was like, yeah, whatever. Um, and then I know after I graduated, I started working in college athletics. Pay is terrible. But that's when I really started to figure out like, okay, at a minimum, I'm like, all right, I need to save my money. Figured, all right, I have a 401k through work. That's enough. Like, that's what I'm taught. Like, that's a safe route. Um, Worked at FAU, which is in Boca for a bit. Then I went to Washington State University. That's where I met David. Um, and that's where we connected. And let's just fast forward to kind of how I got involved with Bitcoin or started learning about it. So I actually first heard about it in, I believe it was 2015. I was home for Christmas break and I was at some pregame and everyone's back from college, everyone's whatever. And I remember that at that point, Bitcoin hit an all-time high. And there was two things that people were talking about when they got home from Christmas break, that break. It was Bitcoin and what the hell is this thing even, like, what is it? And two, it was net neutrality, which at the time
Mm.
was like, are they going to start charging us to use the internet? And those are the two things that people were talking about. And I made some like I posted something on Instagram on which I'll have to share at some point with this podcast if for all three listeners that ever listen probably. But um, it was like if you're not talking about net neutrality or Bitcoin, like don't talk to me. But I said it was the most like uh like I was joking around. Like I could give two
Hey,
shits
you're
about
basically
either.
the same now. If it's not Bitcoin,
Well,
not
yeah,
even don't
now
even talk to me about net neutrality, just Bitcoin only.
yeah, at this, but yeah, now it's a different now I'm serious about it, where I'm like, yeah, if you're not talking about it, like that's exactly. So fast forward to, you know, kind of during the pandemic, like David said, he got into NFTs, and then I started learning about NFTs and was really into that for a little bit. And, I remember I got a text mess. I texted David a bunch of questions about an NFT, and he's like, yeah. I'm like, to be honest, I've just kind of gone down this Bitcoin rabbit hole. And I remember we should show the text, a screenshot of the text for people that are watching on YouTube. Um, but basically, I didn't even respond to that. I was just like, all right, whatever, don't care. And fast forward like a year or two, and I remember me and my girlfriend would go grab coffee every weekend at the same spot. And one weekend I went, and um, the price was different. I went to go get rung up for my coffee, and the price was different than it normally was. And I was like, whoa, like, basically said to the barista, I was like, is that correct? She's like, yeah, prices went up. And I don't know what clicked for me then, but I just got really like annoyed. I was like, all right, so I'm ordering the same exact thing. I didn't get an extra espresso shot. I didn't get an extra flavor. I didn't get a taller, like a bigger size. I'm like, so I'm just getting charged more for the same thing I bought, like that I've been buying for like a year now. I'm just getting charged more. So my money that I've been earning at work is I now have to put a little bit more towards the coffee. And listen, in the grand scheme of things, I think it was probably like 50 cents to a dollar more than normal. But, you know, basically
Thing
once
is,
that
once
happens,
that goes up, yeah, it never comes back down, right?
right, exactly. Not only that, not only does it never go back down, but it's not like that's the only place that's not the
Yeah.
only place in your life where they're, upping the price of something. Your
Yep.
Netflix subscription, your rent, everything starts going up. And I just remember getting really pissed off, and I was like, everyone just chalks it up to inflation. Like, why? I was always like, why is that the case? Why are people just like, yep, inflation? So that's when I went down the rabbit hole of what is inflation? Why does it happen? Which we'll definitely get into in a future episode, but just pissed me off. And I was like, this, like, something about it just led me to wanting to learn more about Bitcoin. I think I started looking up inflation, and on Twitter, they were like, I think it just led me to hearing and seeing people talk about Bitcoin. I was like, I remember David mentioned this. Let me reach out to him. And I remember you sent me a video of Michael Saylor talking about it on Tucker Carlson, and that led me down the rabbit hole of like, holy shit, this is something.
Is that the video
I
that like
believe so.
started? Well, yeah, is that like the one that you remember being? Because that's what it was
Yeah,
for me too. So maybe that's the video we need to be sharing with people as well. Not a
yeah, for
huge
sure.
Tucker fan, but if you're presenting quality content that like talks about an important subject.
Yeah, well, I think Michael Saylor is a very, very, I didn't know who he was truthfully before he sent me that video, but once you do some research on who he is and his background, you could tell he's just a really, you know, brilliant person. He's
Mhm. He's a
went to
genius.
MIT.
He's a
Yeah,
mad
yeah,
genius.
exactly. And so, yeah, I remember watching that video, and I was just like, yeah, I got to learn more about this. And, it just, and that's what we said at the beginning of this episode, was just, once you start learning about it, it's really fascinating. And because that led me to wanting to learn more about the history of money. How was the US dollar? How did it start? Well, then I never, like I said, I never took macro or micro in college. So I started learning about how the US dollar was at one point backed by gold. And I'm like, huh, I didn't even know that. Like, you know, I'm going to sum this up pretty quick, but what it, you just kind of, you start learning about how things work, whether that's the federal government, that's whether it just, you start to realize in terms of money, which is, it's unfortunate, but it's such an important thing in truthfully the US. Like everyone just needs more money to have a better standard of living.
I mean, you could
And
say it's the most important, like, I don't know. I think it's one of the most important, if not the most important things in life. Like, not necessarily that your life needs to be obsessed with it, but it's a means of survival, you know? Like, that's the only way. Instead of going hunting, you're paying money to go to the grocery store and buy food. In the same way that if you went hunting or gathering back in the day and, oh shit, we got like way less than normal, that's not a good thing. If you're going, quote, hunting with your money and coming back with less, like I feel like there's like a primal fear that comes out of that as well. And I know we don't want to get like too political in this, and like we'll try to avoid that. But I think a big part of this 2024 election we just had was largely driven by the economy. Like there's a lot of things like that Trump says that are just like crazy, and a lot of things I personally don't like, but he resonated obviously with these people who felt like their pocketbooks were being affected. And for whatever reason, they felt that Kamala and like her, like Biden, whatever you want to call it, like wasn't able to support them in the same way. So I just think it talks about the importance of like money in people's lives. And like a lot of times I think people are going to make massive decisions for themselves based on finances.
For sure. Yeah. And I think you know, just backtracking a little bit, you talked about COVID, how that was a time where, you and I were really brainstorming of just like, we want to start our own business and, how can we help people? But during that time, something that was truthfully so impactful that we didn't realize at the time, I believe, is the amount of money that was printed during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
during we were all locked down. We all got stimulus checks, which was great, but it obviously helped put food on it was necessary in my, opinion. But, unfortunately the after effects of that is that they just printed a whole lot more money out of thin air, and on top of that PPP loans. And like I said, it helped a lot of small businesses, but that money's got to come from somewhere. And that somewhere is that they print it. And it just, whenever there's more printed of something, not typically, it'll go down in like in value, which is what happened. Like every
Mm-hmm.
dollar that you had in your pocket just got a little less valuable because they just printed a shit ton more of it. And, um,
Yeah.
and, that, like I said, you just start to learn more and more about money. And I think it's real quick. I think it's just so important that, you know, especially our generation, our relationship with money, which is, it's to us, to a lot of people, it's just, okay, it's money is what I earn from working and it's what I use to pay my bills. But like, I think people's relationship with money, and it happened with me, once you learn about Bitcoin, it's those dollars that you're spending, you become a lot more mindful of and protective of. And, um, because, you know, Jack Mallers, someone else that, is big in the Bitcoin space. Um, he always talks about how, money is the time and energy that we put into the world, which I never thought of, but I think it's a really good explanation of what money is, because that's how you earn it. It's the time that we're spending at work, uh, the energy that we're putting into the world is earning us this money that goes into our
Mm-hmm.
bank account. And then we're using it to pay our bills and to go out and eat and to, you know, whatever it is. And so anytime that things go up more in price, you now either you basically have to be making more in order to make up for that, which requires more time and more energy that you're putting. And this is where it kind of seeps into other parts of your life, where now it's, well, now you can't work on that passion project because now you got to pick up a side hustle, or like that. It just, we'll get into this in other episodes. I don't want to go on this whole rant now, just to,
Yeah.
save people this intro episode. But I think
Yeah. I
you
think,
should get the
sorry, go
point.
ahead.
No, I'm
Yeah.
done.
Literally next episode, we're going to get into all of that. I just think, like, just to close your point out, um, I don't know if the energy, but like the general like feeling about society, especially from a younger generation perspective, like isn't very positive for a lot of different reasons right now. And I think at the root of that is money, like the dollar, and like the foundation and like properties of the dollar and how it works. So I think we're hoping by shining a light to more people on how that works, what's going on behind the scenes, and what your alternatives are, that like this whole generational mindset can shift towards one of more prosperity, more opportunity, more saving for the future. I definitely want to pull some stats for the next episode. Like, I think a huge percentage of millennials and Gen Zs like don't even save because they're like, what's the point? Like, whether it's climate change or not being able to buy a house or whatever, they literally think it's pointless because they don't know it, but they know they're getting printed out of like buying things or having like a really solid future. They don't understand why, but they know what the effects of that are. And it pisses people off, to your point. Like, you totally touched on that. Like, it's not a good feeling. It's easy to get angry about. And I think the question is like, how do you direct that anger towards something productive? I think I've wondered that with like social problems in general. And Bitcoin is one of the first times that I'm like, damn, this feels like I can take a stand against the system in a way that actually will like benefit me and other people more than just like Jack Mallers has talked about this too, taking like a cardboard picket sign to the front of the White House and saying, stop printing dollars, stop printing dollars. Like, they don't care. The only way, like, you almost have to like vote with your money, put your money where your mouth is, whatever you want to call it. So hopefully we can all do that together as this continues to grow.
Yeah. And obviously, it's worth noting, nothing we say here is not financial advice. And like, we're just two people that are open-minded and have wanted to learn just about anything in general. Kind of like tired of the status quo, and it's kind of what's led us to this. And so maybe this resonates with you, and you're saying like, yeah, I kind of have I kind of feel the same way about things. Um, well, like David said, the Michael Saylor, Tucker Carlson interview is a great start. Um, there's also a video called "What's the Problem," which is on it's on X. So if we could share a link somehow, I'll like I said earlier, we're new to this, so I'm going to try to figure out how we can do that. Maybe in I don't know, on YouTube or something. But it's called "What's the Problem," and it's on X, and it talks about just kind of uh, Bitcoin. It's easy to sit there when you first hear about it and you think of it as, you kind of lump it into cryptocurrency in general, which in our opinion, you should not be doing. We strongly advise to be open-minded about it, because it is not there are these shit coins and these other cryptos that, truthfully, um, we just believe that Bitcoin is not and should not be
Well, and there's
thought of.
reasons for that, right? It's not
Right.
just like we feel, it's like there's actual properties of this technology that make it different.
Right. And yeah, exactly. So, um, basically the "What's the Problem" video, it tells you about, in order to understand why Bitcoin's great, is to understand like what the problem is to begin with and why Bitcoin is a great
And
solution.
episode 2, we'll get into that as well on the Gen B podcast.
Exactly. Um, but that's just kind of the general idea of this podcast is provide some really good content we could give you, not even from us, but from other things that we've seen online that we thought was really helpful, that helped us throughout this, this financial/Bitcoin journey that we're on. So,
I think one other thing I want to call out before we wrap up this first one is, I think it's easy for people, like, again, not financial advice, but a lot of these podcasts you hear, people were buying their first Bitcoin at $800, $3,000, $10,000, whatever it is. So it's like, okay, yeah, you've obviously made a ton of money already. Of course you like this thing. That's not the case with Evan and I. I think our first buys were both around like $40,000. So we were not buying in like 2008. I bought for the first time in 2021. You were in 2023 or whatever it was. So we're talking about this because we still see the value of it even at today. Like, if we look at price right now, it's at 101,000. the average salary of 50, 60,000 a year, it's like nearly impossible for somebody to get to one Bitcoin. But I think that's something to keep in mind is it's not about getting to one. It's about learning about what this is and like how this can help create a better financial future for you, even if that's 0.001, 0.01, zero point 0.1. Like there's a lot smaller increments that you can consider. I think we would suggest, without making it financial advice, to look into this and consider just having more than zero as a starting point. I
Get
think
off of
there's
zero.
get off zero. Yeah. I just think there's value to having some skin in the game and kind of forces you to start to do more research and everything. So as we get like our YouTube set up and our social medias, like we're totally happy to have conversations with people as well. Excuse me. Um, and just help folks. Like we've never created content before. Like this isn't like we're content creators who are like, oh, this looks like a market we can take advantage of. It's literally we're passionate about this subject. We talk about this on our own for hours at end, so we might as well put it in a place where other folks can like maybe learn something and have conversations with us as well.
Yeah, it's real quick. I think you hit on a great point, by the way, of just like everyone thinks that they're late to Bitcoin whenever they hear about it for the first time. I remember
Mm-hmm.
that like you said, like when I heard that you were getting into it, I was like, I like you said, it was around the 40s when I started buying, and I'm like, damn, am I late? And as we're recording this podcast, it's January 19th, 2025, day before Trump's inauguration, and the price, I believe, is at 99, if I'm not mistaken.
101.
101. So, I'm, you know, and also I go to this Bitcoin meetup, this local Bitcoin meetup that's like 6 or 7 people that I found online, really cool people. And those people got in super early, and they know people that got in even earlier than them. And it's like, what you come to realize is like, don't be surprised if, the price at the end of 2025 is more than now. And nothing's guaranteed, obviously, but, I think we feel pretty strongly that um, once you learn about it and do your research and hopefully listen to our podcast, maybe you get a little bit more confident of like, man, I think I should start believing in this thing. Because at least for me, I see, you see it online too, but I see a lot of parallels to like uh, the almost like the inter- internet being started. This is a brand new type of technology in terms of just like internet money. People are just like the majority of people have no idea how it works or what it is. Um, and that's the same thing with the internet back in the day, right? I mean, it started, no one really knew its capabilities, but obviously it's turned into, you know, we have the ability to film this podcast now using the internet when back then they probably couldn't even wrap their heads around of what it's capable of now.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with this technology, this blockchain technology that Bitcoin is like, you know, the properties of Bitcoin, I guess, too, is just what is so it could be something we look back on in 10, 15 years and we're like, holy shit, I can't believe this thing we had the ability we were early on it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people that believe in Bitcoin do feel that we're still early, and I'm sure you feel the same way. But um,
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about it that I, when we're trying to get people interested in it for the first time, like Evan was like the first person that I was able to get interested in it. And like when I was buying in 2021, price pretty quickly fell off a cliff down to like as low as 16. And as it was starting to like chop back up, I was telling other friends and family like, hey, I really feel strongly about this for like the properties that are, and no one was interested in it. Like there's a very funny meme on X that's like, oh, I wish if it's at 60,000, oh, I wish I had bought it 20. Price goes to 20. LOL, I ain't buying that shit. Like there's just something about human mentality that when something's dropping, like is just scared to buy it. Um, but I think what I found has been really valuable and it makes sense is literally just look at how much in dollars it's gone up, like percentage wise, year over year. Like if you look at Bitcoin's returns year over year since it was made, it's like the best performing asset every year, minus like a couple bear years. But even that's like cyclical for reasons that we'll get into as well. So even if you don't care about all the ins and outs of what like actually makes this a really good savings technology, maybe even the best savings technology, think about it from just like your bank account. Like if you want more dollars, history has shown, and that doesn't mean it will necessarily be that way going forward. You're going to have more dollars than you did before by at least looking into this and having a little bit of it. So again, not financial advice, more just like do your research and start to like dive into this because we think it's that important.
And I'm glad you touched on that. I remember when you first started telling me about Bitcoin, like, I'm not technical at all. So it was really hard for me to wrap my head around like the properties of Bitcoin. Like I understood like, okay, it's capped at 21 million coins. So I understood, and I work in the sports card industry. So I understand the, like why scarcity is important in terms of just
Mm-hmm.
like why something's valuable. But outside of that, like the blockchain technology, I'm like, I didn't know shit about that and like didn't really like care to learn about it at the time. But I went through this like checkbox in my brain where I'm like, okay, this thing has it's historically been the best performing asset over the past 10 plus years. So I'm like, okay, it checks that box. And now I'm thinking, and this was when I first started buying, I'm like, okay, well, what are my options? I could put in a high yield savings account that will net like was that 5% or so, if that. I mean, now
Mm-hmm.
it's less, truthfully, I believe. I could put into stocks. I could put it into like VOO or SPY, but I'm like, which I still did at the time, but I was like, how am I not going to even just put a little bit of money into the best what like this thing has performed the best the past 10 years. How am I going to sit here and not put even just a little bit? That was what I kept thinking. I'm like, why would I'm young and I can deal with it's volatile, it's very volatile, but I'm like, I can deal with it. I have time on my side, so
Yeah.
I'm like, so I'm sitting there saying, I got to put a little bit in, like, and just see what happens. And, that's like you said earlier, once you have skin in the game, you want to learn more about it because you're like, and that's how you kind of build that confidence over time where you're like, or that conviction where you're like, Man,
Mm-hmm.
this makes a lot more sense. Which, you know,
Well, and I think that's a good segue for like how we want to structure this. And it may not be exactly what I'm going to say here, but we almost want to take somebody through this like orange pilling journey, it's called, where again, today's just an introduction. I think we've given a little taste of like what's behind the curtain that we want to talk about. But there's like levels to understanding this. And like we have levels to go still ourselves. So like part of this journey will be us continuing to learn too. But it's getting into the why behind Bitcoin. And then from there, it's the how it works. Like why, meaning like, what are the issues in the world and why do we think this solves for that? And then you get into the technicalities, which same as you, I'm not a technical person. Like I can't wait to study that a little bit more and try to like break it down for people as best we can. And then you start to get to a point of like being future looking as well. Once you understand it enough, is like, how can we contribute to this ecosystem? Like, what is the future potential of this? What effects on society could there be? There's potential right now of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which I don't necessarily have an opinion on it. Like, since I'm a proponent of Bitcoin and I think there's value for saving in it, I think it'd be good for the country, but I don't understand enough about it. So we'll learn about all these things together and just really try to help like flow you guys or like ease you into what is this about, and again let you do your own research and branch off from there, but hopefully just being a good jump off point for people who haven't focused on this previously.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's going to be a crazy next 4 years. Just, this is the first time we've really had a president and government that's been pro Bitcoin crypto. So this next 4 years is going to be really, really critical and interesting for the space and also our country. I think that's fair
Mm-hmm.
to say. So, um, I think it's in everyone's best interest to at least learn about it, because this is going to be something that I think impacts all of our lives moving forward. So,
Yep.
yeah, I think that's a
Cool.
good place to end it. And is there anything you wanted to add?
No. Good luck to everyone. Like next time we post, Trump will be president. So hopefully that bodes well for everybody and Bitcoin and your finances and all of that. But yeah, we're excited to go on this journey with you. And um, yeah, we're going to keep putting content out. I think we want to do some bite-sized things as well. And we're just going to see what works for us since we're brand new at this. But if you're watching this, thank you.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, please feel free to DM us, whether it's our personal accounts or our Gen B social account. Please feel free to reach out, because we want to help answer any questions. But yeah, until next time, uh, appreciate you listening up until this point, and we'll talk soon.
All right. See y'all.